The grand opening of the Museum of Cursed Artifacts was an event shrouded in both anticipation and unease. Nestled in the heart of the old town, the museum occupied an ancient mansion that had stood vacant for decades, its windows like darkened eyes staring out over the cobblestone streets. The townspeople, curious and apprehensive, gathered outside, their breath visible in the chilly evening air. Inside, the curator, Evelyn Morgan, oversaw the final preparations. Her keen eyes scanned each exhibit, ensuring every artifact was perfectly displayed. Each item had a dark history, and Evelyn knew the stories well, perhaps too well. As a historian with a peculiar fascination for the macabre, she had spent years collecting these items, each with its own tale of sorrow and death. The heavy wooden doors creaked open, and the first guests filed in, their murmurs filling the grand hall. Elegant chandeliers cast a dim glow, their light barely penetrating the shadows that seemed to cling to every corner. Among the visitors was a young woman named Lily, drawn to the museum by an inexplicable urge. Her friends had teased her about her morbid curiosity, but she couldn't resist the pull of the place. Lily's footsteps echoed as she wandered through the exhibits, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and dread. She paused before a glass case containing a porcelain doll. The doll's once pristine face was marred by a hairline crack, its eyes a piercing blue that seemed almost alive. A placard read, "Annabelle, the doll of despair." "She's beautiful, isn't she?" a voice whispered beside her. Startled, Lily turned to see an elderly woman with silver hair and a kind smile. "Yes, she is," Lily replied, though she felt anything but comforted. The doll's gaze was unnerving. "They say she belonged to a little girl who died tragically. Her spirit is said to linger seeking companionship," the woman continued, her tone tinged with sadness. Lily nodded politely and moved on, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the doll's eyes were following her. As she continued through the exhibits, the unsettling sensation grew stronger. She felt watched, and not just by the other patrons. In another room, a grand mirror framed in tarnished silver caught her eye. It stood taller than a man, its surface reflecting the dim light in an almost otherworldly way. The placard beneath it read, "The Witch's Mirror, Reflector of Fears." Intrigued, Lily stepped closer. As she stared into the mirror, her reflection wavered and distorted. Suddenly she saw a vision of herself, aged and withered, her eyes hollow and haunted. She gasped and stepped back, but the image remained for a moment before fading back to her normal reflection. Her heart pounded in her chest. "What's wrong?" her friend Jessica asked, appearing beside her. "I saw something in the mirror," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. Jessica laughed, dismissing it as a trick of the light, but Lily knew what she had seen. The mirror had shown her something dark, something real. The evening wore on and the atmosphere grew heavier. Guests whispered among themselves about strange occurrences, cold drafts, eerie sounds, fleeting shadows. The museum seemed to breathe with a life of its own, and a sense of foreboding settled over the crowd. As the night drew to a close, Evelyn made her way to the central hall to address the guests. She stood beneath a grand portrait of the mansion's original owner, a stern-faced man whose eyes seemed to follow her. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice steady despite the unease in the room. "Each artifact here holds a story, a piece of history. But remember, these items are not mere curiosities. They are imbued with the remnants of those who once owned them. Treat them with respect." A sudden crash echoed through the hall, and the lights flickered. Gasps and murmurs spread among the guests. Evelyn's eyes darted to the source of the noise. A display case had toppled over, its contents scattered across the floor. Among them was an ornate dagger, its blade glinting menacingly. A chill swept through the hall, and Evelyn felt a presence, a dark, oppressive force that seemed to wrap around her. She knew then that the spirits attached to these artifacts were stirring, awakened by the intrusion of so many living souls. The grand opening had begun, but the true horror of the Museum of Cursed Artifacts was just beginning to unfold. Lily couldn't get the image of the cracked porcelain doll out of her mind. Annabelle, the doll of despair, seemed to have etched herself into Lily's thoughts, her glassy blue eyes haunting her dreams. Despite her friend's reassurances, the feeling of being watched lingered long after they left the museum. A week later, on a dreary Friday night, Lily found herself standing outside the museum once more. Rain drizzled down, soaking her hair and clothes, but she couldn't resist the pull. She had to see the doll again, to understand the strange connection she felt. Evelyn, the curator, was surprised to see her. "Back so soon?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Lily nodded, feeling a bit embarrassed. "I can't stop thinking about that doll. Annabelle. There's something about her." Evelyn's expression softened. "Many people feel a connection to certain artifacts, but be careful. Annabelle's story is a tragic one, and her spirit is restless." Ignoring her unease, Lily made her way to the exhibit hall. The museum was eerily quiet after hours, the only sound the soft patter of rain against the windows. The lights were dimmed, casting long shadows that seemed to dance in the corners of her vision. She reached the glass case and stared at Annabelle. The doll's face was just as she remembered, cracked, yet somehow still beautiful, with those unnervingly lifelike eyes. As Lily leaned closer, she thought she saw the doll's lips move, whispering something she couldn't quite hear. "You came back for me." Lily's heart skipped a beat. She stepped back, shaking her head. "I'm imagining things," she whispered to herself. But the whisper came again, clearer this time. "Please, help me." Against her better judgment, Lily reached out and touched the glass. It was cold and smooth, but she felt a sudden warmth spread through her hand, like a soft touch. Her vision blurred, and for a moment she saw a little girl standing where the doll was, her eyes wide with fear. "Find my locket," the girl said, her voice echoing in Lily's mind. "It's the key to freeing me." Lily stumbled back, breaking the connection. She looked around, but the hall was empty. The doll was just a doll again, silent and still. Determined to uncover the truth, Lily began researching Annabelle's history. She spent hours in the library, poring over old newspapers and records. She discovered that the doll had once belonged to a girl named Eliza, who had lived in the mansion over a century ago. Eliza had died under mysterious circumstances, and her parents, overcome with grief, had donated the doll to the museum. According to local legends, Eliza's spirit had become attached to the doll, seeking someone to help her find peace. Lily knew what she had to do: find the locket Eliza had mentioned and return it to her. The next evening, armed with a flashlight and a map of the mansion, Lily returned to the museum. Evelyn, sensing her determination, reluctantly allowed her in after hours. "Be careful," Evelyn warned. "The spirits here are unpredictable. They can be vengeful." Lily nodded and made her way to the attic, where old records suggested Eliza's belongings had been stored. The attic was a dusty, forgotten place, filled with cobwebs and old furniture covered in sheets. The air was thick with the scent of decay. She rummaged through boxes and trunks, her flashlight casting eerie shadows. After what felt like hours, she found a small, ornate box hidden beneath a pile of old clothes. Inside was a delicate gold locket, its surface engraved with intricate patterns. As she picked it up, a sudden chill swept through the attic. The door slammed shut, and the temperature dropped. Lily's breath came out in white puffs, and she felt a presence behind her. "Thank you," a voice whispered. Lily turned to see Eliza's ghostly form, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You freed me." But before Lily could respond, the attic was filled with other spirits, angry, tormented souls drawn to the locket's power. They swirled around her, their whispers growing louder, more menacing. Evelyn burst in, her face pale. "We need to leave now." Lily clutched the locket and followed Evelyn down the stairs. The spirits pursued them, their wails echoing through the mansion. They reached the front door and stumbled outside, slamming it shut behind them. The spirits' cries faded, and the air grew still. Lily looked at the locket in her hand, feeling a strange sense of peace. Eliza's spirit was free, but the museum's other inhabitants were far from it. Evelyn placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've done something incredible, but the museum is still cursed. We must be vigilant." Lily nodded, her heart still racing. She knew she had only scratched the surface of the museum's dark secrets. The haunted doll was just the beginning. The eerie encounter with Annabelle had shaken Lily to her core, but it had also ignited a burning curiosity within her. The museum was a place of darkness, and she felt compelled to uncover its secrets. As the days passed, her thoughts returned to the grand mirror she had seen during her first visit, the witch's mirror. Determined to understand its sinister nature, Lily returned to the museum one rainy afternoon. Evelyn greeted her with a wary smile, aware of the pull the artifacts had on her. "You're becoming a regular," Evelyn remarked. "Be careful, Lily. The more you involve yourself with these items, the stronger their hold on you." Lily nodded, but her resolve was unshaken. She made her way to the exhibit hall, her eyes drawn to the tall, ornate mirror that dominated the room. The tarnished silver frame was intricately carved with twisted vines and grotesque faces, and the glass seemed to shimmer with an unnatural light. A placard beneath it read, "The Witch's Mirror, Reflector of Fears." Taking a deep breath, Lily stepped closer. She stared into the mirror, half expecting to see the distorted reflection from her first visit. Instead, she saw herself. But there was something off. Her eyes were darker, and her expression seemed haunted. As she continued to gaze into the mirror, a strange sensation washed over her. The room around her faded, replaced by a shadowy landscape. She saw herself standing alone in a forest, the trees twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands. A thick fog rolled in, obscuring her vision. Suddenly, she heard a rustling behind her. Turning, she saw a figure emerging from the mist, a woman dressed in tattered black robes, her face hidden beneath a hood. The woman's eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and her voice was a chilling whisper. "You seek the truth, but are you prepared to face your deepest fears?" Lily's heart raced. She tried to speak, but her voice was caught in her throat. The woman raised a bony finger pointing at her. "Look into the mirror and see your fate." The fog swirled around Lily, and she found herself back in the exhibit hall, staring into the mirror. Her reflection twisted and changed, showing scenes of horror and despair. She saw herself alone and lost, surrounded by darkness. She saw her friends and family, their faces contorted in fear and pain. She saw visions of death and decay, of spirits haunting her every step. "No," she whispered, closing her eyes to shut out the images. But the woman's voice echoed in her mind. "Face your fears, or they will consume you." Lily opened her eyes and forced herself to look into the mirror once more. This time she saw a small, frightened girl standing beside her, a reflection of her younger self. The girl's eyes were wide with terror, and she reached out, her hand passing through the glass to touch Lily's. "Help me," the girl whispered. "Don't let the darkness take us." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes as she realized the truth. The mirror was not just showing her fears. It was revealing the fear that had plagued her since childhood. The fear of being alone, of losing those she loved. Summoning her courage, Lily placed her hand on the mirror's surface. The glass was cold, but she felt a warmth spreading through her, a connection to the little girl within. "I won't let the darkness take us," she vowed. The reflection shifted, and the woman in the black robes reappeared. But this time her expression was one of sadness, not malice. "You have faced your fear," she said softly. "Remember, the mirror shows only what is within you. Use this knowledge wisely." The room returned to normal, and Lily found herself alone once more, her reflection calm and steady. She felt a strange sense of relief, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Evelyn appeared at her side, her eyes filled with concern. "Are you all right?" Lily nodded, though she felt exhausted. "I'm fine. I needed to see." Evelyn's gaze lingered on the mirror. "The witch's mirror is powerful. It reveals the darkest parts of ourselves. But you faced it and came out stronger. Not many can say that." As they left the exhibit hall, Lily knew she had only begun to scratch the surface of the museum's mysteries. The witch's mirror had shown her the power of the artifacts and the importance of understanding them. But she also knew that facing her fears was just the beginning. The cursed objects were still restless, their spirits yearning for release. The night was far from over, and the true horror of the Museum of Cursed Artifacts was only beginning to unfold. The unsettling encounters with Annabelle and the witch's mirror had only deepened Lily's resolve. Each artifact held its own dark story, and she was determined to uncover them all. Her next target was the Phantom Ship's bell, a relic with a history as tragic as it was mysterious. The bell was housed in a small, dimly lit room at the far end of the museum. Its bronze surface was tarnished with age, and intricate carvings of sea creatures adorned its base. According to the placard, the bell had belonged to a ship that had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. It was said to ring on its own, heralding doom to those who heard it. Lily entered the room, her eyes drawn to the bell's eerie presence. As she approached, she couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding, as if the air itself was charged with dark energy. She wasn't alone. An elderly man stood before the bell, his back to her. He wore a weathered navy jacket, and his posture was stiff with age and experience.
He turned slowly, revealing a face lined with deep wrinkles and eyes that seemed haunted by memories. "Can I help you?" Lily asked softly. The man's gaze shifted to her, and he nodded. "I'm Captain James Hargrove, retired sailor. This bell, it calls to me." Lily recognized the name. Captain Hargrove was a local legend, known for his stories of the sea. "Do you know the story behind it?" Hargrove's eyes darkened. "Aye. The bell belonged to the Sea Phantom, a ship that vanished without a trace. I knew some of the men on that vessel. Good men, lost to the depths." As he spoke, the room grew colder. Lily shivered, but her curiosity was piqued. "What happened to the ship?" "No one knows for sure," Hargrove replied. "Some say it was a storm. Others whisper of something far worse. But one thing's certain, The bell rings when death is near. Lily glanced at the bell, half expecting it to toll. "Have you heard it ring?" Hargrove nodded solemnly. "In my dreams. Every night since the ship vanished. It's like a summons, a call from the deep." The captain's words sent a chill down her spine. "What do you think it wants?" "Rest," Hargrove said simply. "The spirits of the crew are restless. They seek someone to set them free." Determined to help, Lily decided to investigate further. She spent the next few days digging through old maritime records and logs, piecing together the Sea Phantom's final voyage. The ship had set sail on a clear day, laden with cargo and a crew of 20. It had encountered a sudden storm and then nothing. No wreckage, no survivors, just silence. One stormy evening, Lily found herself back at the museum. The sound of rain against the windows mirrored the storm that had claimed the Sea Phantom. She met Captain Hargrove in the bell's room, his expression grim. "I found this," she said, handing him an old logbook she had uncovered. "It's the Sea Phantom's final log. The last entry mentions a strange fog and an eerie bell tolling just before they vanished." Hargrove's hands trembled as he took the book. This might be the key to understanding what happened. As they read through the log, the room seemed to darken, and the air grew thick with tension. Suddenly the bell tolled, a deep, resonant sound that echoed through the museum. Lily's heart pounded in her chest as the temperature dropped sharply. "The spirits are here," Hargrove whispered, his breath visible in the cold air. The room was filled with a spectral mist, and ghostly figures began to materialize. They were sailors, their faces etched with sorrow and desperation. The captain of the Sea Phantom stepped forward, his eyes meeting Hargrove's. "James," the ghostly captain intoned, "you've come." Hargrove stood tall, facing his old friend. "Aye, Captain. We've come to set you free." Lily held up the logbook. "We know about the storm, the fog, and the bell. What can we do to help you find peace?" The ghostly captain pointed to the bell. "Ring it once more. It will summon the sea's wrath and release our souls." Hargrove hesitated, then nodded. He reached out, grasping the bell's rope. With a deep breath, he pulled. The bell tolled again, its sound a mournful cry that seemed to pierce the very fabric of reality. The ghostly sailors began to fade, their expressions softening as they were enveloped in the mist. The captain's eyes met Lily's one last time. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice carried away on an ethereal breeze. As the spirits vanished, the room grew warmer, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. The bell was silent, its duty fulfilled. Hargrove sighed, a look of profound relief on his face. "They're free," he said softly. "Finally." Lily nodded, feeling a sense of accomplishment. But she knew there were still many more artifacts, each with its own dark story, waiting to be uncovered. As she and Hargrove left the museum, the storm outside had calmed, and a sense of peace settled over the town. But the true horror of the Museum of Cursed Artifacts was far from over, and Lily was more determined than ever to unravel its mysteries.
The Phantom ship's bell had been a harrowing experience, yet it had only intensified Lily's drive to explore the museum further. The artifacts were more than mere objects. They were gateways to unresolved stories, and Lily felt a compelling need to uncover and resolve these lingering mysteries. Her next investigation led her to the blood-stained locket. The locket was displayed in a small, velvet-lined case, its delicate gold chain coiled like a snake. The locket itself was heart-shaped, ornately engraved, and ominously beautiful. Beside it, a placard read, "The blood-stained locket, a bride's tragic end." Lily's fingers hovered over the glass case, a sense of sorrow emanating from the locket. She had read about this artifact during her research. The locket had belonged to a young bride named Eleanor, who had died on her wedding day under mysterious circumstances. It was said that the locket had absorbed her blood, and anyone who wore it would be haunted by her spirit, seeking justice. Determined to find out more, Lily requested access to the museum's archives. Evelyn, ever watchful, handed her a dusty box filled with old newspapers, photographs, and personal letters. As Lily delved into the documents, a tragic love story began to unfold. Eleanor had been deeply in love with her fiancé, Thomas. They were to be married in the grand ballroom of the very mansion that now housed the museum. On the day of the wedding, tragedy struck. Eleanor was found dead in her bridal suite, her locket stained with blood. The cause of her death remained a mystery, and Thomas, heartbroken, had disappeared shortly thereafter. Among the papers, Lily found a letter addressed to Thomas, written in Eleanor's delicate handwriting. It spoke of her excitement for their future and mentioned the locket, a gift from Thomas, which she cherished dearly. The final lines of the letter were smudged with what looked like tears. Driven by a sense of urgency, Lily decided to wear the locket, hoping to connect with Eleanor's spirit. That evening, she stood before the exhibit, her heart pounding. With a deep breath, she opened the case and clasped the locket around her neck. Instantly, a cold chill spread through her body. The lights in the room flickered, and the air grew heavy. Lily felt a presence behind her and turned to see a ghostly figure, a young woman in a tattered wedding dress, her eyes filled with sorrow. "Eleanor," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. The ghost nodded, her form flickering like a candle flame. "Please help me," she pleaded, her voice echoing with despair. "Find Thomas. He knows the truth." Before Lily could respond, the vision faded, and she was left alone in the dimly lit room. Determined to uncover the truth, she began her search for Thomas. Lily spent days combing through historical records and talking to locals. She discovered that Thomas had retreated to a small, secluded cabin in the woods after Eleanor's death. Many believed he had gone mad with grief, but Lily suspected there was more to the story. With a map and a flashlight, she ventured into the dense forest. The path was overgrown and treacherous, but she pressed on, driven by the need to help Eleanor. As night fell, she finally reached the cabin. It was dilapidated, the windows boarded up and the door hanging on its hinges. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. Old furniture lay scattered, and cobwebs hung in every corner. On a small table, Lily found a stack of letters tied with a faded ribbon. They were addressed to Eleanor, each one more desperate than the last, revealing Thomas's descent into madness. Lily read the final letter aloud, hoping to summon Eleanor's spirit. "Eleanor, my love, I cannot live without you. I will tell the truth, though it may destroy me." A cold breeze swept through the cabin, and Eleanor's ghost appeared once more, her eyes filled with longing. "Thomas," she whispered, reaching out a translucent hand. Suddenly, another figure materialized, a gaunt, hollow-eyed man. Thomas's spirit stood before them, his expression one of deep remorse. "I'm sorry, Eleanor," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I tried to protect you, but I failed." Eleanor's eyes softened. What happened, Thomas? Why did I die? Thomas's form wavered as he spoke. It was an accident. I found you in the bridal suite, unconscious. I tried to revive you, but the locket, it cut your neck and you bled. I panicked, and in my fear, I fled. Tears streamed down Eleanor's ghostly cheeks. You should have stayed. We could have been together. Thomas reached out, his hand passing through hers. I am so sorry, my love. I have lived with this guilt for eternity. Lily watched as the two spirits reached for each other, their forms merging into a single radiant light. The locket around her neck grew warm, and then with a flash, it disappeared, leaving only a sense of peace in its wake. The cabin was silent once more, but the oppressive atmosphere had lifted. Lily knew that Eleanor and Thomas had found their peace at last. As she made her way back through the forest, she felt a sense of accomplishment and a deeper understanding of the museum's dark secrets. Yet she knew there were still many more artifacts to uncover, each with its own tragic story. The blood-stained locket was just another chapter in the haunting saga of the Museum of Cursed Artifacts. The resolution of Eleanor and Thomas's tragic story brought Lily a brief sense of peace, but she knew that many more mysteries awaited her in the Museum of Cursed Artifacts. Her attention turned next to a particularly foreboding exhibit, the cursed samurai armor. The armor was displayed in a room draped with dark velvet curtains, the walls adorned with ancient Japanese tapestries. The suit of armor stood on a pedestal, imposing and eerily lifelike, as if the samurai who once wore it might step out of the shadows at any moment. Its dark, lacquered plates and fearsome mask radiated an aura of malevolence. Lily read the placard. The armor of Takeda Mitsunari. Beware the vengeful spirit. Legend had it that Takeda Mitsunari, a fierce and loyal samurai, had been betrayed and killed in battle. His spirit, filled with rage and a thirst for vengeance, was said to be bound to the armor. Those who dared to touch it would invoke his wrath, bringing death and misfortune upon themselves. Lily felt a shiver run down her spine as she gazed at the armor. It seemed to pulsate with an inner darkness, as if the spirit of Mitsunari was watching her, waiting for someone to awaken him. Determined to uncover the truth, Lily decided to investigate further. She delved into historical records and ancient texts, learning about Mitsunari's life and untimely death. According to the records, Mitsunari had been a loyal retainer, betrayed by his lord in a power struggle. His last words were a curse upon those who had wronged him, vowing to return from the grave to seek revenge. One evening, armed with her newfound knowledge, Lily returned to the museum. Evelyn greeted her with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Are you sure about this?" Evelyn asked. "The armor is one of the most dangerous artifacts we have." Lily nodded. "I need to understand what happened to Mitsunari. I need to help him find peace." Evelyn reluctantly handed Lily a small key. "This will unlock the case. Be careful, Lily." Taking a deep breath, Lily approached the armor. She inserted the key into the lock and opened the glass case. As she reached out to touch the armor, the room seemed to grow colder, and a gust of wind stirred the tapestries. The moment her fingers brushed the lacquered plates, a powerful force knocked her back. She hit the ground hard, gasping for breath. When she looked up, the armor was glowing with an eerie red light. A ghostly figure materialized beside the armor, a tall samurai, his face twisted with rage. His eyes burned with an intense hatred, and he drew a spectral katana, pointing it at Lily. "Why have you awakened me?" he demanded, his voice echoing with fury. Lily scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding. "I seek to understand your pain, Takeda Mitsunari." I want to help you find peace. Mitsunari's eyes narrowed. Peace. There is no peace for me. I was betrayed, dishonored. My soul burns with vengeance. Lily swallowed her fear. I know you were betrayed. I know your pain. But holding on to this anger only traps you here. I can help you move on, but you need to let go of your hatred. The samurai's form flickered, his rage momentarily giving way to sorrow. How can I let go? My honor was taken from me. My life was stolen. Lily stepped closer, her voice gentle but firm. Your honor lives on in your legacy, in the stories of your bravery and loyalty. Your enemies are long gone, but you remain, bound by your own anger. Release your spirit from this torment. Mitsunari's spectral form seemed to waver, his katana lowering. My enemies. Gone? Yes, Lily said softly. Their time has passed. You can find peace now, free from the chains of your past. The samurai's expression softened, his fierce eyes growing distant. Perhaps you are right. Perhaps it is time to let go. As he spoke, the red glow around the armor began to fade. Mitsunari's form became translucent, his features calm and at peace. He looked at Lily, a ghost of a smile on his lips. Thank you, he whispered, before dissolving into a wisp of light that vanished into the air. The room grew warm again, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. Lily stood alone, the armor now lifeless and still, just an empty shell. She felt a profound sense of relief and accomplishment. Mitsunari's spirit had found peace at last. Evelyn entered the room, her eyes wide with amazement. You did it, she said, her voice filled with awe. You truly have a gift, Lily. Lily nodded, her thoughts racing. The museum still held many more cursed artifacts, each with its own story of pain and suffering. But with each spirit she helped find peace, she grew more determined to uncover and resolve the mysteries that bound them. As she left the exhibit hall, she knew that the true horror of the Museum of Cursed Artifacts was still unfolding, but she was ready to face whatever came next. Lily's recent success in helping the spirit of Takeda Mitsunari find peace had bolstered her confidence, but she knew the Museum of Cursed Artifacts held many more mysteries. Her attention now turned to a seemingly innocuous item displayed in a dimly lit corner, an old ornate quill. Its feathers were black as night, and the gold inlay shimmered with a faint, eerie glow. The placard beneath it read, "The Bewitched Quill. Writer's Madness." According to the museum's records, the quill had once belonged to a famous author named Jonathan Ward, who had gained renown for his dark and macabre tales. It was said that Ward had gone mad, writing furiously day and night until he was found dead, clutching the quill in his cold, lifeless hand. The stories he wrote in his final days were rumored to have come true, bringing horror and chaos to those around him. Determined to uncover the truth, Lily asked Evelyn for access to Ward's personal writings and the quill itself. Evelyn, though wary, could not deny Lily's growing expertise and dedication. "The quill is dangerous, Lily," Evelyn warned as she handed over Ward's journal. "Be careful not to use it for writing." Lily nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. She spent the next few days immersed in Ward's journal, which detailed his descent into madness. The entries began normally with descriptions of his daily life and writing process, but soon became erratic, filled with frantic scribbles and disturbing imagery. One entry caught her eye. "The quill whispers to me, its voice dark and seductive. It promises fame and immortality, but at what cost? I cannot stop writing, even as the words turn to nightmares." As Lily read on, She felt a chilling connection towards desperation. She knew she had to experience the quill's power firsthand to understand its true nature. She decided to write a simple, harmless story, hoping to uncover the secret behind its bewitching influence. One stormy night, alone in her small apartment, Lily carefully removed the quill from its case. She dipped it into an ink bottle and began to write on a blank piece of parchment. As the quill moved across the paper, it seemed to take on a life of its own, guiding her hand with a forceful but elegant flow. She wrote a tale about a young woman named Emily, who lived in a quaint village. Emily discovered a hidden garden filled with flowers that bloomed under the light of the full moon. The garden held a secret entrance to a magical world where dreams came true, and Lily described Emily's joyous adventures with vivid detail. But as she wrote, the quill began to tug harder, forcing darker elements into the story. The magical world turned sinister, filled with shadowy creatures that whispered malevolent promises. Emily's joy turned to terror as the creatures pursued her, and the once beautiful garden became a twisted nightmare. Lily tried to stop, but the quill refused to release her hand. Panic set in as she realized the quill was controlling her, feeding off her fears and transforming them into words. With a final desperate effort, she tore the quill from the parchment, breaking its hold. Breathing heavily, she stared at the completed story, its dark ending a stark contrast to her initial intentions. A cold breeze swept through the room, and she felt a presence behind her. Turning, she saw the ghostly figure of Jonathan Ward, his eyes filled with sorrow and madness. "Why did you write, knowing the quill's curse?" he asked, his voice a mournful whisper. "I needed to understand," Lily replied, her voice trembling. "Why did it drive you mad?" Ward's ghostly form flickered. The quill was a gift, promising greatness, but it came from a place of darkness. It feeds on creativity, twisting it into horror. I couldn't resist its pull, and it consumed me. Lily held up the parchment. "Can the curse be broken?" Ward's expression softened. "Perhaps. The quill's power lies in the fear it instills. To break its hold, you must face your deepest fear and write it, without letting the darkness consume you." Determined to end the quill's curse, Lily took a fresh piece of parchment. She dipped the quill in ink, her hand steady despite the fear gnawing at her heart. She began to write, this time telling her own story. She wrote about her encounters with the cursed artifacts, the spirits she had helped, and the fear that had followed her since childhood. The fear of being alone, of losing herself to the darkness. As she wrote, the quill trembled, resisting her control, but she pressed on, pouring her soul into the words. The room grew colder, and the presence of Ward's spirit intensified.
Shadows danced on the walls, whispering her name, but she focused on her story, refusing to let the darkness take hold. Finally, she wrote the last word. The quill fell from her hand, and a blinding light filled the room. The shadows receded, and Ward's spirit stood before her, his form clear and calm. "You've done it," he said, his voice filled with relief. "You faced your fear and broke the curse." As Ward's spirit faded, the quill crumbled to dust. Lily felt a weight lift from her shoulders, a sense of peace settling over her. She had not only freed herself, but also Jonathan Ward from the quill's dark influence. Evelyn found her the next morning, exhausted but triumphant. "You did it, didn't you?" she asked, her eyes wide with amazement. Lily nodded. "The quill is no more, but there are still many artifacts left to uncover." As they left the museum, Lily knew her journey was far from over. The true horror of the Museum of Cursed Artifacts was still unfolding and she was ready to face whatever came next.
The resolution of the Quill's curse had left Lily emotionally drained, but more determined than ever to unravel the mysteries of the Museum of Cursed Artifacts. Her next focus was a particularly ominous item, a ceremonial dagger displayed prominently in a case at the center of the main hall. The dagger's blade was dark and gleamed malevolently, its hilt adorned with intricate carvings depicting sinister figures. The placard read, "The Sacrificial Dagger, Blood of the Innocent." The dagger had a chilling history. It had been used in ancient rituals to summon dark forces, requiring the blood of the innocent to activate its malevolent power. Rumors abounded of those who had dared to touch the dagger, only to meet with tragic fates shortly thereafter. Lily's curiosity was piqued, but this time she wasn't alone in her quest. A group of her friends, intrigued by her tales of the museum, insisted on joining her. Despite her initial reluctance, she agreed, hoping their presence might offer some protection against whatever horrors lay in wait. On a cold, moonless night, Lily and her friends, Jack, Sarah, and Emily, gathered at the museum. Evelyn, sensing their determination, reluctantly allowed them in after hours. "Be careful," Evelyn warned, her eyes filled with concern. "The dagger is dangerous. Do not underestimate its power." The group made their way to the main hall, the museum eerily silent around them. The dagger seemed to pulse with a dark energy, its presence almost palpable. "So, what's the plan?" Jack asked, his bravado barely masking his unease. "We need to understand its history," Lily said. "If we can figure out how it was used in the past, we might be able to neutralize its power." Sarah and Emily nodded, their faces pale in the dim light. They began sifting through old texts and documents Evelyn had provided, hoping to find clues about the dagger's rituals. Hours passed, and the air grew heavy with tension. Finally, Emily found an ancient manuscript that detailed a ritual involving the dagger. It spoke of a blood sacrifice, but also of a way to reverse the curse, by offering a willing sacrifice of one's own blood to cleanse the blade. "It says here that a willing sacrifice can break the dagger's curse," Emily read aloud, her voice trembling. "But it has to be done at the stroke of midnight, during a new moon." Lily checked her watch. "We have an hour until midnight. We need to prepare." They gathered in the main hall, arranging candles and drawing the symbols from the manuscript on the floor around the dagger's case. The atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive, as if the very air was resisting their efforts. As the clock neared midnight, they heard a soft whispering, growing louder with each passing minute. Shadows flickered at the edges of their vision, and the temperature dropped sharply. Lily took a deep breath and stepped forward, the manuscript in hand. "I'll do it. I'll be the one to offer my blood." "No, Lily, you've done enough," Jack protested. "I'll do it." "We should do this together," Sarah suggested. "We can all offer our blood. That way the burden doesn't fall on one person." The others nodded, agreeing to share the risk. They each pricked their fingers, letting a few drops of blood fall onto the dagger's blade. As the blood touched the blade, it began to glow with an eerie red light, and the whispering grew into a cacophony of voices. The clock struck midnight, and a powerful force shook the room. The symbols on the floor glowed brightly, and the candles flickered wildly. The group stood in a circle, holding hands, their faces pale with fear and determination. Lily recited the incantation from the manuscript, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "By the blood of the willing, we cleanse this blade. By our sacrifice, we break this curse. Let the darkness be banished, and the innocent freed." The dagger's glow intensified, and the voices reached a deafening pitch. Then, suddenly, There was silence. The red light faded, and the dagger lay still, its malevolent energy dissipated. The group collapsed to the floor, exhausted but relieved. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, replaced by a calm, peaceful energy. "We did it," Emily whispered, tears of relief streaming down her face. Lily nodded, her heart still racing. "The dagger's curse is broken." Evelyn entered the hall, her eyes wide with amazement. "You've succeeded again, Lily. The museum owes you a great debt." As they left the museum, the first light of dawn began to break on the horizon. Lily knew there were still many more cursed artifacts to uncover, each with its own dark story. But with the support of her friends and her growing understanding of the museum's secrets, she felt ready to face whatever came next. The true horror of the Museum of Cursed Artifacts was still unfolding, but Lily was prepared to meet it head-on. Lily's triumph over the sacrificial dagger had brought a fleeting sense of relief. However, the cumulative weight of the curses she had encountered and the lingering presence of dark spirits began to manifest as a deep, gnawing unease. The museum, with its heavy shadows and echoing halls, felt more oppressive than ever. The artifact's malevolent energies seemed to be growing stronger, feeding off each other. Evelyn sensed the rising tension and decided it was time to take decisive action. The museum had to be cleansed, once and for all. Evelyn gathered Lily and her friends in her office, the air thick with urgency. "The artifacts are becoming more powerful," she explained, her voice tense. "We need to perform a ritual to contain their spirits and purify the museum. If we don't, the spirits may break free, and the consequences will be disastrous." Lily, Jack, Sarah, and Emily listened intently. The gravity of the situation was palpable. "What do we need to do?" Lily asked, her resolve unwavering. Evelyn pulled out an ancient, leather-bound book from her desk. "This is the Grimoire of Binding, a powerful text that contains the necessary ritual. We must gather the artifacts in the central hall and perform the binding ritual before midnight." The group sprang into action, carefully retrieving the cursed items from their displays. Annabelle, the witch's mirror, the phantom ship's bell, the blood-stained locket, the samurai armor, the bewitched quill, and the sacrificial dagger, all were brought to the center of the museum. Each item radiated an unsettling energy, their combined presence almost overwhelming. As they arranged the artifacts in a circle, Evelyn began to draw intricate symbols on the floor with chalk, surrounding the items with protective runes. The air grew thick with tension, and an unnatural chill settled over the hall. With everything in place, Evelyn opened the grimoire and began to chant in a language that felt both ancient and powerful. The candles flickered, casting long, dancing shadows across the room. The artifacts seemed to pulse in response to the incantation, their dark energy stirring. Lily and her friends stood in a circle around Evelyn, their hands clasped tightly. The ritual demanded their collective strength and focus. As Evelyn's chanting grew more intense, the room began to tremble, and the air was filled with a low, ominous hum. Suddenly, a powerful force swept through the hall. The artifacts shook violently, and ghostly figures began to materialize, spirits bound to the cursed objects, their faces twisted with anguish and rage. They howled and screamed, their voices blending into a cacophony of torment. Lily's heart raced as she saw familiar faces among the spirits. Eliza, Takeda Mitsunari, Jonathan Ward. They hovered near their respective artifacts, their eyes pleading for release. Evelyn's voice rose above the chaos. "Focus! We must contain them!" Lily closed her eyes, summoning all her strength. She visualized a barrier of light surrounding the artifacts, pushing back against the dark energies. Her friends did the same, their combined willpower forming a protective shield. The spirits' howls grew louder, their forms becoming more solid. They surged towards the barrier, but the light held firm. Evelyn's chanting reached a fever pitch, and the symbols on the floor glowed with an intense, blinding light. With a final, resounding word, Evelyn completed the ritual. The light surged outward, enveloping the artifacts and the spirits in a brilliant, purifying glow. The spirits let out a final, anguished cry before being drawn back into the artifacts, their forms dissolving into wisps of mist. The room fell silent, the oppressive energy dissipating. The artifacts lay still, their malevolent presence subdued. The air felt lighter, the shadows less menacing. Evelyn lowered the grimoire, her face pale but triumphant. It's done. The spirits are contained and the museum is cleansed. Lily and her friends collapsed to the floor, exhausted but relieved. They had faced the darkest forces within the museum and emerged victorious. Evelyn helped them to their feet, her eyes filled with gratitude. You've done something incredible tonight. The museum is safe, thanks to all of you. As they stepped outside, the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow. Lily felt a profound sense of peace. The true horror of the Museum of Cursed Artifacts had been confronted, and for the first time the future seemed bright. Yet, she knew their journey was not truly over. The artifacts still held their dark histories, and new visitors would undoubtedly bring new challenges. But with her friends by her side and her unwavering determination, Lily was ready to face whatever came next. The museum stood as a testament to their courage and resilience, a place where darkness had been met with light and fear with hope. The haunted halls would remain, but the spirits within had been given a chance at peace.